I'm Garland Thompson, Media and Program Manager for the Salinas Public Library. These interviews are presented as part of Salinas Stories. The interviews are as recorded and do not necessarily represent the views of the City of Salinas or the Salinas Public Library. For further information, see the City of Salinas Disclosure and Use Policy.
March 19th, 2009, and we are in the John Steinbeck Library at 350 Lincoln Avenue in Salinas, California. We are going to be talking with Lois Falbo, who was Lois Keithley before her marriage. We are also here with Bonnie, her daughter, and
Falbo and Sweet is my married name.
Oh, Sweet is okay. And we would like you to tell us something about your family and your years growing up in Salinas, and then your remarkable career choice.
Yeah, I have several of those. My family immigrated way back to the United States, England and Germany and Scotland, and came across the country. I think most of them early settlers came by wagon train and landed in Northern California. My mother's family and my father's family lived in Kelseyville, Lake County, California. And I had a great-great-grandmother who came from Scotland, whose name was McMahon. And I remember her because I think she was over 100 years old when I last saw her, and she had a place on Clear Lake with a screen porch facing the lake, and she still made cookies. And I guess all children remember grandmothers and great-grandmothers that made good cookies. So then, my mother and father were childhood sweethearts, and my father was in World War I. And after he got out at the age of 21, he married my 18-year-old, at the time, mother. And I was born about a year later, and then I had a sister, Vivian, who was born 2 years and 7 days after I was. And when I was 4 years old, my father, maybe I should tell you that we came from Lake County where they grew lots of pears. My father had studied with Luther Burbank when he was very young and learned how to prune fruit trees and graft them. So he had an offer from some gentleman who owned a pear orchard here in Salinas Valley. We did not grow lettuce here then. It was mostly orchards. And they were having problems raising the pears here, so I don't know whether my dad found out they needed somebody or vice versa. So he was offered the job. Wasn't much left up in Lake County for him to do with his knowledge, so he came down here when I was 4 years old. And we moved to the orchard, which was someplace outside of Salinas. I figure by now it's probably in the city limits. I'm not sure whether it was Spence Road or it was someplace between Salinas and Chular. Yes. And we were down the road quite a ways. The roadies lived at the corner where the mailboxes were. And so if we wanted the mail, we had to drive up to where they were and vice versa. And so the Musers had a dairy out not too far from us. So when I started school, I went to a one-room schoolhouse. And I don't know whether it was on Old Stage Road or exactly where that was, but Pat Garland should have thought it might have been on Old Stage Road. And so I went there till I was in the 4th grade. And that one-room schoolhouse, we had a marvelous teacher, Mrs. Jacks. And she was later awarded great honors by Stanford University, and she was originally a Spanish family and had they had land grants, and so when she passed away, she left all the land she owned to Stanford University.
Oh.
And she was a wonderful teacher. We had a stage that we had to perform on at that early age, and so I will get back to her later because she affected my knowledge. And so when I was 4 years old, we moved to King City. It was during the Depression. They pulled up the orchards because they couldn't get any money for the pears. And they weren't doing well in this valley. It wasn't really hot enough to grow them here. And so they pulled them all out and tried to start hothouse tomatoes in little off-the-ground tents, which was a lot of work for the poor laborers. And so that didn't go over too well. In the meantime, my father had an offer at California Orchard Company down in King City. All their trees, they had nut trees, I think they were walnuts, and they needed pruning and stuff, and they knew he had the knowledge to do that. So we went there. I remember my mother didn't like it because it was so hot. And the wind blew. She used to say all she had to do to sweep the floor was open the front door and run and open the back door and then close it real quick. But she hated it there. So anyway.
Your parents' names?
Oh, my mother's, yes. My mother's name was Edith. My father's name was Seth Keithley. And my sister's name was Vivian. She lives here in Salinas. And so finally, the pruning wore out, and my dad knew my mother didn't like it down there. So he found a job in Salinas, and you know, I can't remember what he did that next job. So we rented a house, and it was right on the corner of someplace, I think it was where Romy Lane and Main Street, South Main Street were. I'm not sure about that. But it was in that vicinity, and there wasn't much of anything out there. And so then later we found a house closer in town. But I went to Lincoln School here, and I had wonderful teachers there. And then I went to the middle school, which was on right down at the corner of this street, Lincoln, on this block, which they tore down later and made Washington School. And I went to Salinas Union High School, graduated the class in 1940. I had wonderful teachers. The school systems were excellent. We vied with Atherton, Menlo Park, and Burlingame schools. One year we would be the highest, and the next year they might. And it was back and forth. It was a competition thing, I think. And so after I graduated from high school, I went to, it was Salinas Junior College at the time, and it's now Hartnell.
Right.
And I went there for 9 months. I took business courses during the Depression. It was very difficult to go to college, especially for girls. So I knew that was going to happen. So I took business courses, and I got good grades. And so when I was in May, before the Salinas Junior College was to graduate for that year, the business manager of the school, the teacher who was in charge of the business department, called me in. He looked like Basil Rathbone. He did. And the actor.
Oh my.
And he wrote articles for the Great Shorthand magazine and everything else. So he called me into the office and he said, "Elsie, I think you've gone as far as you can go. You don't need to go here anymore. You know everything you need to know." I was getting AIDS. And so he says, "There's one job open in town this summer." He said, there aren't going to be many jobs open here for a long time with the Depression the way it is. He says, I want you to go and try for it. I was 17, almost 18. I graduated earlier. And I was scared to death. He said, he could tell by the look on my face that I was scared to death, you know.
Huh.
So he says, well, I just asked you to go, and the experience will be good. You'll learn how to apply for a job. He says, I really think you should try it. So I did. He made the appointment for me, and I went down there, and there were all these women lined up. I thought, I don't have a chance, because most of them were older than I. And so I thought, well, I came this far, I might as well go try and find out what it is to have an interview. So I went in, and I was so scared, and I got a shorthand test, and I got a typing test, and I got the verbal test of some kind. And I was shaking in my boots, and the guy who gave the interview wasn't very nice. He was a hard-nosed guy. And so anyway, I went home thinking, well, that's never going to happen. So 2 weeks later, I get a telephone call that I had the job, and I could have fainted on the spot. So I went to work for the Bank of America as a secretary. Yeah, in the installment credit loan department where they made car loans and the other kinds of loans, and I did dictation and stuff. So anyway, I did that for 6 months. I also learned a lot of other things while I was there. And I got a call from the superintendent of the schools office. They wanted me to come for an interview. I was done. I said, an interview for what? Well, Peggy McCollum is leaving. She's going to go to San Francisco to work for a speckled sugar company up there. And I thought, Peggy, I knew her, and I knew of her. She was about 4 years older than I. And I thought, oh, she's getting adventurous. So, anyway, so I went for the interview, and I guess I was the only one they called. I got the job on the spot. So I went to work for Dr. Case till I went in the Navy. He was a wonderful superintendent. He was a wonderful man to work for. He was still a teacher at heart, and he wanted me to learn everything I could learn in that office. I had to learn how to do the bookkeeping. Well, I'd taken courses, and that was nothing really new. We all could do each other's jobs. And at that time, the Salinas school system was all in one office. Well, actually, there were 3 smaller offices. It was on the mezzanine floor of the Salinas National Bank, which is on the corner. They keep changing the name of it all the time now. It's across from where Dick Burns' old store was. And so it was on the mezzanine floor. It wasn't huge offices. And the whole school system for the whole city of Salinas was running that one office. With Dr. Case, the superintendent of buildings and grounds, the business manager, the bookkeeper, and me. All out of one office. And we did everything. So I had charge of the payroll and the contracts, and for everybody that worked through the school system, from a special school for disabled children, the 3 grammar schools, the middle school, the high school, the Salinas Adult School, and the Salinas Junior College.
Do you remember the name of the school for special education?
It was someplace out where Alice is now, I think. I do not remember. But I thought that was quite interesting that we got all that work out of one little office.
That's amazing.
And now you got, what, 7 districts?
Absolutely.
Of course, there's a lot more people here now, too.
Yes, the population has grown.
Yeah.
A lot.
I'm not even sure Main Street was paved when we first moved here, when I was 4. I'm not sure if it was.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
offhand.
And so they used to have a lot of stuff going on around here for kids. We had painting contests for the art classes, where they'd have well, like for Poppy Day, as we used to call it. What is it, Memorial Day? Poppy Day?
Could be May.
Yeah, in May.
30th or 31st.
And our art teacher, Leon Amix, who became famous for his watercolors.
Oh, yes.
And so he was my teacher. And so we paint these posters and, compete for who won the prize.
Is this in grade school or high school?
Middle school,
Middle
7th
school.
and 8th grades. Yeah. I had to quit art classes, much to my regret, because I got the chicken pox when I was 16 years old. And I mean, my sister got them first, and we got quarantined for 2 weeks then. By the last night of the quarantine, I had such a high fever, and I was literally covered inside and out with chicken pox. And I looked terrible, I felt terrible, so I missed 2 months of school in high school at 16. I had to make up my business courses, so I had to go to summer school, take some extra stuff, and I figured I did not have time for the art class anymore, much as I loved it.
That's a shame.
Mr. Amix, he really didn't want me to quit. And
You were saying how you could walk around the streets here and go to the library?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, we used to go roller skating at night, a whole bunch of us. I don't know how the people in the houses liked it, but they never said anything.
Or did you roller skate?
All around town, over by the high school, and then they had a roller skating contest every year.
Oh,
Right down on South Main Street here, in Old Town. Yeah.
For heaven's sake.
I won it 2 years in a row. I got a pair of new skates each year. That was the prize. So, anyway.
What else did you do for fun?
Oh, in high school we had dances every week. I don't know if it was every weekend, but we had a lot of dances on one night a week, I think. And it was good, clean fun. We had football games and basketball games on weekends. Everybody turned out. So.
And what do you remember about the library?
Well, the library, I used the library all the time. In fact, when I was in high school, one of my classes was working in the library.
Oh.
And the lady who was running it, I wish I could remember her name, she was here for years. Later became in charge of the Salinas Adult School.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. So,
Heaven's sakes, well,
Ellen Ward, I think her name was Ellen Ward.
Hmm.
And so ask me a question, I'm losing my chain of thought.
Oh, yeah, I shouldn't have interrupted. I was trying to think of, I know.
Something else about the superintendent's office when I was working for him. He told me that my teacher, Mrs. Jacks, in the one-room schoolhouse, he said, you had a good education because she started you out right. He said she's one of the finest teachers that probably this valley ever produced. So that was up to the time I left. They probably had a lot of good ones, you know.
Do you remember her first name?
No.
Okay.
That's all right. It's
Yeah.
no problem.
I know where she
Tell
lived.
me where your house was. You lived on Hawthorne Street.
My mother and father, when they started giving out GI loans for servicemen, my dad was a veteran of World War I. So he right away wanted to buy a house. And so they bought one of the first houses on Hot Dog Street. The streets weren't paved yet. It was right out where Avalar's onion field was.
And what year would this have been?
1936 we moved in. Yeah, just before I started high school, just before my sister started middle school.
Well, your dad must have had a good job then.
I think he was working for the agriculture department of the county, I think.
And where did he end up working before he passed?
Well, he worked at the first, he worked for the county because I remember they had that lettuce strike and people were shooting guns off, and I think he quit that job then. Oh, it was terrible. The unions went on strike. It was just terrible. So then he went to work for the Associated Seagrowers. And I used to work there 2 summers in a row. You know, during the Depression, I had babysitting jobs. And I had worked in the seed house at Associated Seagrowers in the summer for 3 months to earn money to buy my school clothes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. You think sorting seeds, beans on a belt all day long is fun. But we had to do those things. I remember my mother, when she lived in King City, she loved Joan Crawford movies, but she didn't have a dime to go to the one she really wanted to see. That's how much movies cost. So, things have really changed.
Well, it sounds like were your girlfriends also motivated to go like to Hartnell College?
Yeah, most of them. Yeah.
Were they?
Yeah. I had a nice group of girlfriends. And everybody during the Depression was on the same level. Rich and poor.
That's always
Didn't
nice.
have too much distinction. Some of the lawyers and the doctors and stuff got paid in chickens and stuff instead of money. Things were tough.
So what led to your really momentous decision to join the Navy?
Okay. After high school, I went to work at, the superintendent's office. Oh, and my girlfriend and I, when the war came along, if she was in the office I was working in, she had worked at the Bank of America, and they also lost their bookkeeper shortly after I started working there, so they wondered who to hire. I said, well, my friend Ella works at the bank, and she's very good at everything. So they hired her. So she and I worked at the superintendent's office together. And when the war came along, you know, they had to ration everything here in the United States. So guess who got picked out to draw up all the rationing papers?
Oh my goodness.
Ellen and I stayed up all night typing, and everything had to be mimeographed in those days. There were no copying machines. And we worked all day and all night, and the boss, the superintendent, came in the morning, looked at us, he says, have you been here all night? We said, yes, we finally finished about a half hour ago. He says, go home and get some sleep. So we did those papers, and they went to the different offices all over the county to be handed out, and that was, they could copy it from then on if they wanted to, but that was their Bible.
And this was for all of Salinas, or?
The whole county.
The whole county?
Yeah. Of course, it wasn't that big then.
But this came through the bank? I mean, the bank?
The superintendent's
Superintendent's office.
Superintendent's
Yeah.
office. Oh, for heaven's sakes.
Yeah. So, and then, my husband was, we were dating. We were getting kind of serious, and so the war came along. But I have to tell you about this. Claude and a friend of his and the friend's cousin went out on a ride on a beautiful morning, the Sunday morning that they hit Pearl Harbor. And we came back to our house, and my mother saw the car coming up the driveway, and she leans out the window and yells, we're at war, we are war. At war, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. They had heard it on the radio that morning. And we all looked at each other. We didn't know what was going on, so we got out and went in. And she told us what had happened on the radio. Everybody was in kind of shock and didn't understand it or anything, you know. So anyway, the guys were thinking they'd better get into the service, but they were a little bit young that year. It was 1941, I guess, wasn't it? And so in those days, you had to be 21 to go into the service unless you had your parents' approval. You couldn't get married either until you were 21 without your parents' approval.
I think I remember.
So anyway, Claude went up to San Francisco and hired the bum to swear him in as his father. And he wasn't 21 by any means. So, let's see.
Was he from
Claude
Salinas?
is
Oh, yes.
your husband.
Yes, I married Claude Falbo. We went to high school together, but I didn't like him very much in high school. When we went to junior college, he had grown taller and bigger and looked more handsome. And was just a different kind of person.
That happens.
Yeah. So, anyway, he decided he was going to go in the Marine Corps.
Ooh.
Yes. For 4 years he signed up. And everybody said, you're crazy, the war won't last that long. Well, it did.
Yes, it did.
We were in 2 wars at the same time.